In practice, a lot of the stuff we want to do is actually to convert old contour maps to structure maps. And in those cases, we have a large number of relatively predictable lines like contours and the fault outlines that we're trying to turn into vector data. And you can do that in Petrosys 20.2. We've added a new function to make that easier to do based on the underlying raster image. So in this particular case, we have a map of a structure in the Gulf of Mexico. And the first thing you need to do is to georeference that. So I pop the image into my mapping window. So you georeference your image, and then you go into the spatial editor. So you invoke edit for spatial editing. In the editor, we're now editing the raster image. What we're going to do is we're going to use the underlying image to help us trace the contours. And we're going to zoom in a little bit further up here. Pick the raster tracking option, which is a new feature. Enable that. We can pick the color that we want to track. So just as with the color to polygon option, you could pick the eyedropper, hover over your black. And, I've already done that. You've got a couple of options like smoothing and reducing the noise in the lines that you do. And then because we're digitizing contours, it's giving us the extra feature of just being able to specify a contour increment, a contour level, and a contour stepping thing. And now, when we go to digitize on the map, if we're well away from the image, it'll still be as normal. But if we navigate our mouse close to one of the existing contours, you see it actually picks up, identifies the underlying contour in the raster image, and it turns the cursor into a little hand. And that means it's ready to start tracking. And I can now point at some other point on that line. And you see it'll actually identify that point and it'll track along the line very nicely. So now what you can do, you can actually use the underlying raster image to identify line segments that you want to include in your line. Now you're going to ask me, well, what happens when you use the annotation? Because it's going to try to wrap itself all around the annotation in a weird way. So we've allowed for that. You press the space bar and it temporarily disables the tracking. Go to the other side, you've captured the point to the other side of the annotation, and then you press the space bar and it reverts back into picking mode. So you see it's gone back into find a line mode, and there we can keep tracking and into the find a line mode. So you can now digitize contours a little bit like the create shapes from underlying shapes option, except that the shapes are being automatically recognized from a raster image. So that's a quick overview of how the contour digitizing works. It's actually quite productive.